Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Going to talk a little bit about Riff's Lemuria, which is one of my favorite Riffs books that have come out in, easily the last 2 decades. Um, because the Lemurians had been mentioned early on in the Riff series, going back as far as Rifts Under Seas, despite being one of the more later books in the World Book series, they fit rather seamlessly into the setting in many ways. And I find them actually one of the best options in terms of like a framing device for player characters who are new to the Rift setting. Um, because they spent so much of their history kind of locked in a dimensional void, and they have a real kind of narrow focused background history because of that. There's things about them that are like understandable because they're humans in origin. They're kind of like a root civilization that modern day Polynesian and coastal Asian and even some Native American groups have sprung from, who were lost at the same time that Atlantis had disappeared 10,000 years ago. Mu is not a lost continent. It's their floating ziggurat city that uses the same stone magic that Atlanteans employ. In fact, there's some debate whether or not the Lemurians or the Atlanteans are the ones who first came up with that. They don't use it to build pyramids, though, in the same way that Atlanteans do. Their thing is like big floating stone cities that are submersible, or can fly in the air and that kind of stuff. Anyway, Mu was like sucked into a dimensional void when Atlantis disappeared, and kind of did not experience as much of the passage of time as went by in the outside universe. And so when Atlantis returned, Mu was brought back into the middle of the Pacific Ocean or Indian Ocean, and there's been kind of slowly getting its bearings again, and has only recently started actively trying to explore the surface world. They've been known to some of the underseas factions. They've been, immediately find themselves as being enemies to groups like the Not Ill or the Lord of the Deep and his cultists, and came to an early understanding with groups like the New Navy, and kind of like a friendly rivalry kind of thing going on with Tritonia. And they still remember their old alliances with the Atlanteans, even though the Atlanteans themselves by this time have experienced that entire 10,000 year time period, so they don't have as much of a fresh memory of who the Lemurians are, aside from just some notations from old history books and kind of stuff to them. But there is kind of like a natural alliance between the two because culturally they're still rather aligned with each other, and they have kind of similar realms of overlap in terms of the kind of stuff they do. Lemurians are more biotech focused. They have modified themselves for an undersea life, although they're not like fish-tailed merfolk kind of things. They still look like people. It's just they have some limited underwater breathing abilities and some genetic enhancements. Not too dissimilar to the kind of genetic enhancements that true Atlanteans have, at least in terms of power levels, even if they have slightly different things they do. They're not so much into tattoo magic and stuff. They are, big into biotech and harmony with animals. A lot of them will keep lemurs as pets. They got like an interesting serpent hunter class, where that bonds with like a large, mosasaur or some other kind of like sea dinosaur or sea monster as like their personal mount. They have like kind of like stone statue, robots that kind of look like Maui from Easter Island. And Easter Island is like one of their territories. They're basically kind of spread out across the South Pacific and into the Indian Ocean. Their positioning of stuff like Easter Island kind of makes them natural that in terms of like alliances in the Americas. The Incas are a natural fit, especially since part of the Incan Empire in Rift's Earth includes the modern day descendants of the Nazca, and the Lemurians had also been allies with the Nazca back in ancient times. They're also, like in the more newer books, like the Vampire Source book that expands on the timeline for what's been going on in Rifts, Mexico. Apparently, the Lemurians are helping back Reed's Rangers in their efforts to wage war on the vampire kingdoms. Also, in the Lemurian setting, it actually gives you a little bit more of an idea of what the Indian Ocean is kind of situated like. There's a vampire crab people menace led by none other than old Davy Jones himself. There in the Indian Ocean, so it actually kind of gives you something to do with your Rifts Africa source book besides look for the apocalypse demons and fight Pharaoh Ramesset in the New Phoenix Empire. A lot of the coastal territory that's under threat from these crab demons is like everything from Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, all the way down to Madagascar. And because since the Lemurians are an ocean-going civilization, they can range all the way around all this kind of stuff. They got a lot of different villain opportunities, and because, like I said, they're just now kind of starting to explore their surface world. If you have all your player characters be Lemurians, you only have to explain Lemurian backstory to them, and then they can learn about the Rift's world through that lens instead of having to explain to a new player all this background information they'd need to have to understand what life in North America or South America or wherever you're starting your Rifts campaign out in. And also for older players, like it's a chance to play something like that's kind of been a legend in the background of the Rift setting for a while. That's like only recently, in relative speaking terms, in terms of Palladium production rates recently, has it actually been given as an actual proper option to be played. Also, their power levels do make them a natural fit for surviving what is to be encountered in the Rift setting. They also make a natural fit for characters who are involved in trying to defeat the demon and devil armies that have invaded Earth. If you're going forward with minion war kind of stuff, the book describes the city of Mu. It still exists. It's basically just a big floating giant super ziggurat in of itself, with ziggurats on top of it and huge population, king, all that kind of stuff. It also has stats so you can build other random smaller floating cities if you want, although I would just use Mu itself and just stick with that. Like I said, they have control over Easter Island. They have some like wondrous hidden underwater mountain valley garden kind of thing going on. Octopus's garden in a cave kind of shit. And they're naturally good guys. They're aside from the obligatory, there's an evil dude inside the ranks of the nobility who wants to take it all down from the inside kind of bullshit that you find in a lot of things in the setting occasionally, where it's like just a few too many layers of conspiracy. Like there's enough stuff in this setting to present already. We don't need 5 secret sub-inception layers to this kind of stuff sometimes, but for the most part, they're pretty much framed entirely as like good guy defenders of the Earth types. They got the tech and the reason to be able to range all around the world, so you can have them explore pretty much anywhere on Rift's Earth or interdimensionally. Getting your brain around, I guess, some of the weird, like, strange and genetically engineered dolphin walking creatures that they've made and stuff. Like, it might be a little fanciful, but it's no better or worse than anything else you can find in Rifts when it comes to that kind of task of describing the things that the players are seeing to the players. But overall, like I say, I find Lemuria is just a solid product in terms of world books. It finally finishes out this last little bit of the Rift's Undersea setting that got talked about then was never written for a long time. And it makes a really good entry point for player characters, especially if you have some players who have not played Rifts before. And it allows you to really roam around the entire planet and explore all corners of things and not feel like you have to be wed down to the starting location of like, well, we started off in Minnesota, so I guess the entire campaign is going to take place in and around Minnesota. Kind of stuff you can find yourself quagmired in from time to time. So check it out, Rifts Lemuria. Leave comments, hit like and subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as always, stay waspinated.